Hello, everyone, and welcome to JNUC 2020. We're so happy that you've joined us, and you are watching our Patch Management Solutions panel. My name is Sam Weiss, and I am on Jamf's Technical Partnerships and Alliances team. Our team manages the Jamf Marketplace, which is the ecosystem of third-party solutions that connect, integrate, and extend the use of Jamf. And I'm really honored today to be moderating this panel with, in my opinion, some of the brightest minds in the Apple Mac admin community. So with that, folks, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Ben Toms, also known as MacMule.
Hi, I'm Ryan from Electrona.
Hi, I'm Armin. You know me as the author of Scripting OS 10, but I also work for Jamf now.
I'm Isaac. I'm with Man Consulting.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming together. This is going to be a really great session. And if this is your first JNUC, or if you didn't catch our panel conversation from last year, I'd highly recommend putting it on your watch later list. Don't leave now. Go watch it later. But in some ways, it is a part one to this conversation. Last year, we had 3 panelists, all of which we're excited to welcome back. We had some really interesting topics around application deployment, patch management, and really talking about the philosophy and design of app lifecycles for your users. We had fun stories of when patching has gone horribly wrong. And similar to this year, we had a solution overview where you're going to hear from the creators of third-party patch management tools that you can use in your environment. So again, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, save this for later. But with that, we're really excited to dive into this year's panel. And with that, I want to welcome a new member to our panel, Isaac from Man Consulting. Thank you so much for joining. Most of these folks are returning from last year, but you are a new member to this panel. So we kicked off everyone last year with the same question because we'd love to get your take on it. What is patch management?
Yeah. So patch management for me is the ability to deploy applications and update them in a way that both meet IT's needs to enforce that, but also do it in a way that people can continue to work and do their job, and do that in a way that is the least painful to them.
Yeah, when we think about patch management,
it's a fairly simple methodology.
I think that's great because we're going to talk about this, especially some questions for you later. But there is, the plumbing and the infrastructure of patch management, but there's also that human component of how does this feel, or how did it interrupt or assist in the work that I'm doing. So yeah, welcome to the panel, and we're excited to have your input today. Now, looping back to Ben, Armin, Ryan, you all joined us last year for our conversation on patch management, and it's been a long year. And so we wanted to kind of circle back and ask, between updates to macOS and the Apple ecosystem, it's obviously kept everyone on their toes, but specifically as it involves patch management, what's changed in the last year, in your opinion, on Mac and the ecosystem of patches that have to be considered by IT admins? Ben, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I think right now it's more of a matter of maybe what's changing versus what's changed, particularly the way that I see it. Last year, between this year, there hasn't been a huge amount of change, but with the, not to date this recording too much, but with the new or forthcoming macOS, there's a new PPC being introduced called System Policy App Bundles, which is a requirement to allow an application to update itself or update third-party applications. It's still, as of this recording, it's quite early days in regards to this, but that wasn't available before. That wasn't a requirement before. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge and a new thing. For those of us that are deploying and we've got signed code, etc., we should be okay with the PPC, but those folks who are maybe using scripts and code methods that they've written themselves through Jamf policies, etc., this is where potentially there might become a cropper, but very early days with this new item, basically, to look at. But that's essentially my view on this. Is there's this thing's changing, which could be an impact.
Yeah, and that's a great call out, especially in the Apple world. Probably not a good thing to say, how have things changed, because things are always changing. So it's not just what's happened in the last 365 days, but planning for the next as well. So yeah, love that. Armin, what are your thoughts?
Well, aside from the things coming down in future versions of macOS, I think it's more of gradual change. More and more admins are becoming aware that patch management is something that benefits greatly from automation because it's just so much work in the background if you do it manually. And we have this great bunch of solutions out there that provide this, which make it accessible. I mean, things like Autopackage have been around for literally more than a decade, but it has a bit of a threshold for entering. You have to be fairly good at scripting and understanding the process. But now we get all of these nice solutions. Some of them are hosted. Some of them will actually be part of Jamf that can provide this automation without this entry level of you have to be a good scripter. And I say that as the representative of InstallerMator here, which you probably still have to have some scripting skill to use efficiently. But I'm really excited about these ways of using patch management automation without that.
It's a really good call out because, how has patch management changed? The number of people that want to adopt it, and kind of like you said, solutions out there that are lowering that barrier to entry to allow even the most simplistic of IT organizations to have really advanced patch management, or at least enough to feel safe and secure, is super important. So yeah, that's a great call out. Ryan, what are your thoughts? What's changed in the last year, or as most people are saying on this panel, what is continuing to change that you're kind of keeping your eye on?
Yeah, so I'd agree that it's definitely more of a slow evolution since last JNUC. I think still many companies don't have the staffing or kind of the specialized technical ability to sufficiently patch the apps that they have or that they need to. But kind of what is changing is companies' philosophy around patch management. When a client brings us on as an MSP, patch management is becoming more of an important factor, which is great because that's what we agree with that. And if you have an MSP and they're not evolving to take patch management seriously as well, some folks on this panel could help.
Yeah, that's great. And like you said, the types of organizations that can support that. I mean, love having DataJar, Electrona, and Man Consulting on this call. I think you all represent an important part of the community that not solves this problem not just through technology, but also through the way that you deliver Jamf services as well. So yeah, I love to see not just the evolution in the products, but also how those products are delivered to the market. Again, just lowering that barrier of entry for great patch management.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Okay. Next conversation. We alluded to this in the beginning, but how should admins consider that user and ensure that positive experience around app lifecycle management? I think having that infrastructure, or I guess we'll call it the plumbing, to offer up-to-date software is one thing, but giving that great experience is another. So in your experience, from the customers that you've spoken with, from the tools that you've created, how should admins be thinking about the user? Ryan, why don't we kick off with you?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the user experience is huge. We've worked with and spoken with a lot of organizations, and they're all different. Not just the industry that they work in, but the culture, compliance policies, and just general attitudes towards patching in general. Some want to be more aggressive with their patching solutions. Some want to be more passive, maybe in terms of notifications. But ultimately, the goal it remains the same. People want to be secure and compliant as quickly as possible, but there definitely need to be some concessions made to make sure that you don't cause an update-induced revolt.
An update-induced revolt, is that how you described it?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think there's nothing worse from a user perspective that will interrupt your day from that bad patch experience. I think as IT, we talk about technology problems and people problems, and focusing technology on the problems that it can solve. I think historically patching done wrong is one of those things that the users are very quick to blame IT because it's very visible, right? And I think this crosses the Mac world, the Windows world, it doesn't matter. But I was working in Outlook and it's not up anymore. Like that's a conversation that I think as IT admins we hear a lot. So as IT admins, our goal is usually to be invisible, right? Like when people don't notice, that's when we're doing our best work. So yeah, I think patching is a really important time and a window of opportunity for us to prove that to users. And hopefully they never notice. So yeah. That's great insight. Isaac, any thoughts from you on that positive app lifecycle experience?
Yeah, I think one thing that admins should consider when they're doing patching and when they're communicating with their users through the dialogues of patching is if they make this a bad experience or a difficult experience, people are going to try and circumvent the system, which is going to have a negative impact on the entire patching itself. You'll have stuff like engineers starting to unload processes because it's going to interrupt their work. They're going to figure out a way to try and stop this process. So if you make it easy for your employees and users to just go through those steps and enjoy it as much as possible, then they're going to be more apt to allow it to happen when you ask them.
Now, Isaac, before we move on to Armin, I think you've done a lot of work lately really thinking about the user experience. And you made a comment that you spent a long time thinking about loading boxes or progress bars. Do you want to share a little bit around kind of like what have you been digging into in regards to that user experience?
Yeah, so we found things like how often should a progress bar update when you're downloading an app to show the person download experience and how long it's going to take. Too fast makes it feel like it's jumping. Too slow makes it feel like everything's going slower, even though the download speeds are the same. We also found things like if we're going to quit Chrome so that they need to, stop work, we should reopen it and reopen their tabs for them. Those are things that we found that people are a little more apt to go like, okay, I'm going to quit Chrome because I know it's just going to come back. So
Yeah, and circling back to one of the things you said in the first half of that question, when we consider the user, I think it's important to consider who is that user. Are we patching applications for engineers? And to your point, if they're familiar with system processes and the way that our software all works, if we don't make that a great experience, people are going to start ripping things out if they have the capabilities to. So. Yeah, managing machines for engineers, I think, is always a fun conversation. But yeah, if it goes wrong, they might have the capabilities to be their own shadow IT, perhaps, if we don't provide that great experience. Very cool. Armin, tell us about a positive app lifecycle experience and what admins should be considering.
I mean, this is a really complicated question to answer because every company and every organization can be so different. In general, I think us admins tend to underestimate the skill set and the users and want to hold their hands, maybe a bit too much. But then again, there are situations where that is utterly necessary if we have time critical updates or updates that the user has dismissed for several times. Then the hand holding or maybe even the stick instead of the carrot need to be done. This is a very complicated balance to hit. I know that in some organizations, they are actually fine with the app's built-in update mechanism because most of the developers actually put a lot of thought into that, and they have mechanisms on making sure that the same browser tabs or windows come back after the quit. And maybe we don't even have to do anything but just rely on the built-in app. Again, this really depends on your organization and your timing. One thing that I like to do, if it's possible, is try to coalesce many updates into one session so that the user doesn't get a different update every day, but maybe once a week, all of the updates that are pending run through. And that's kind of making it easier on the user.
Armin, that's such a good question or good answer to roll into our next question. because I want to chat a little bit about this concept of Patch Tuesday or when patches roll out. I think this is an interesting conversation because I'm actually very excited to be educated by you all on this. I have a personal opinion, but as someone that doesn't manage one or even hundreds of Jamf Pro instances, I'm very curious what your thoughts are. As an industry, are we still embracing this idea of Patch Tuesday, where on Tuesday an admin will figure out their patches and deploy them, and then there's that user experience? Or in the world that we live in, do we need to move to something a little bit more fluid, something that feels a little bit more like software development, where things present themselves when they're ready? Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I definitely feel that Patch Tuesday, the mechanism, well, the methodology around there certainly is a thing that I don't think many of us Apple admins have ascribed to. If the technologies that we've got available to us that all of us are going to be discussing generally allow us to follow a model that's a bit more like VPP on a device. The update's ready, we update little and often. And that's the type of thing that we kind of ascribe to with our solution. The idea being that you're going to be kept on top of things. Things are going to be kept updated. Potentially less friction for the user that way, less of an update-induced revolt, as per my now new favourite term. Thanks, Ryan. Because you don't want folks like, I don't know, not able to use a multitude of applications because you suddenly got a staggered set of applications installing. People logging out and it taking hours to do stuff because you've set stuff to install, log out, etc. You really just want to be patching it as the vulnerabilities come in. And through COVID, there's been vulnerabilities to screen sharing apps and things like that, which would need an immediacy there. Why shouldn't that be your default? Really, and just keep patching, keep going.
Yeah, maybe this is a little bit to that balance of what Armin was talking about. There's that experience where do people really love updates popping up all the time, and like, is there a way to get that scheduled, but also to have that flexibility for vulnerabilities, CVEs, and environment, applications that are very deeply tied into the operating system and have connectivity to that. I think it's really important to have that ability, but at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to that user experience and how, as you think about patching in your environment, what dictates something that needs to be tested or just pushed. And if you do have critical vulnerabilities, do those go through a standard testing process or user acceptance that some organizations look at? So yeah, definitely a balance there. Isaac, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are, bug fixes and security fixes wait for no admin, basically. Waiting until the next Tuesday cycle to fix something that is going to either reduce employee productivity or cause vulnerabilities in a browser should not wait. I know a lot of organizations want to say that they actually test every single version of every single app coming in, but at the cadence that Chrome updates, I'm not sure that they actually have the team of hundreds to sit around and do that. So I'm very much for the CI/CD. Let the developers, push out fixes and try and get those onto machines in a reasonable amount of time as possible.
Right on. Cool. Well, I think this question really hits at the heart of automation, and pros and cons of automation. And, I think we've all seen that meme around, oh, it took me a day and a half to create a script for something that takes me 10 minutes and I'll do once a year. When we think about offloading package sourcing, how do you help organizations either deal with the way that you're mitigating or seeing some of these risks as just perceived risks, offloading the actual sourcing of the installer media? Ben, how do you help conversations internally at organizations kind of move forward towards embracing automation and trusting built-in security or workflows that you've built to help organizations stay secure?
Yeah, so within our product, we've got a security guide that we point people to that goes through all the different checks and measures that we put in for the product itself. We look to validate and make sure that we've downloaded the media from the vendor as best as possible. So the code signature, we also check it against virus total. And whilst we use an auto package, we then put in loads of things in there so that basically if any deviation, it hard stops and then we have to go in and manually fix. We're also hosting the packages for people, which I think is different to the majority of folks here. So that kind of puts a lot more onus on us because we literally are the outsourced packaging people for them, for want of a better term. But with that, by putting that automation in there, by validating the packages themselves, because we're looking at 6 figures plus of devices that we're helping with patch management now, we're just making sure we get the valid packages deployed to those devices as quickly as possible, and you're mitigating the risk against 0 days for things like your video conferencing software, your browsers, etc., and getting them out there as soon as possible. The risks around that would obviously be if you delay too much, then potentially you're going to be exposed to these 0 days. They could hit you. The same token, though, there could be a time where, unfortunately, we deploy an update to a product and that might impact someone's classroom because the training material is different. So when we're engaging with customers, we're trying to be very clear to them. We get the update, we're pushing it out. These are the timelines. These are the checks and measures we're putting in. If there's something that's going to be potentially harmful to you in a way, like workflow-wise, documentation-wise, etc., this is where we'd maybe look at manually packaging it, going another route. But you can hit so many compliance requirements and fix so many vulnerabilities and issues by grabbing the software, verifying it, and deploying it out, versus the other methods where folks would just be curling down the software, running as root with no checks and measures at all. So we're only checking the vendor's source, we're checking to make sure we're not man in the middles, we've got public key pinning, various different items like that, so that we've checked on the source that the package is correct, we've done all our validation steps there, and then when the client connects, we're making sure that that connection through is as clear as possible and not being interfered, in the hopes that that allays any fears that folks have.
Ryan, what about you? How do you help folks navigate that risk versus reward of automation?
Yeah, so I think, like Ben, we try to mitigate the risk using the technology in Electron Patch. We do it slightly differently. So Macs that use Electron Patch download the install media directly from the vendor, and every URL that is in our patch catalog where these clients download the install media from are required to be HTTPS, requires valid SSL certificates, requires TLS 1.2 or above, just to name a few. And this uses Apple's App Transport Security feature, or ATS for short. And then lastly, when those clients download the install media, the app's code signature is validated on the client. And if any of those requirements are not met, the application is not installed. And I think that, when you have comprehensive security validations like we have in automation, or that you can do with automation, really all you're left with is the reward portion of automation.
And it sounds like a lot of you are taking the opportunity of introducing automation to introduce a defense in depth type of security by leveraging that automation to go even further than what could be done manually. So yeah, that's awesome. Isaac, what about you? Risk versus reward of automation.
Fully reward, similar to what Ryan said. We've gone along, and this also, since we share some of the same labels and code base with InstallerMator, probably speak for that as well. Is we go directly to the source of the vendor, to their website. We make sure that the HTTPS certificate is valid. We're downloading, from them, just like an admin would download that package. We're also verifying that it's been notarized and code signed by the developer, so that it's not man in the middle or modified in any way. And in a sense, we're also removing ourselves from that middle point, right? We're no longer the risk of, oh, hey, like, you handled this package for me. We never handled the package for them, really. We just put it on the system and let Apple's internal checks take place. So that plus the ability for each customer's antivirus or endpoint protection to inspect it during that process seems to let security know that everything is going to be okay.
Awesome. Great answers. Very different answers, but I think as our customers think about what works best for them, it's really cool to hear just all the different levels, whether it's data in transit, on device, or if it's being stored somewhere else, all the different security considerations that you're all thinking about for your customers. Awesome. And last question before we go into the solution spotlight. Last year, we talked about some patch horror stories, but we wanted to flip this question on its head and recognize some vendors that have really great Mac OS packages, vendors that are prioritizing the Mac admin community like yourself. So, Ben and Armin, would love to hear your thoughts on this. Ben, you want to kick us off on which vendor have you been pleasantly surprised with providing a quality Mac admin experience?
I'm going to be a bit contentious here. They could be the Package Hall of Fame either end, to be fair. But if you've been doing this stuff long enough, or as long as I have, Adobe, I'd like to put in there for their Creative Cloud stuff. They have come a huge way, a long, long way from using CDs that we had to have a special version of Jamf admin or Casper admin to import and interact with InstallerMedia that way. Certain things we couldn't go under certain conditions, etc. Yes, I do bemoan the loss of CCP and actually automated full downloads. But if you listen to the Mac Admins podcast with Dom from Adobe, who's a really nice bloke, by the way, if you get to meet him, he's really great. We've had some Zooms with him and the London Apple Admins. I've got a pub channel. We had a few beers. He's awesome. He kind of alluded to they're still investigating the solution. And you imagine like, Adobe's a big ship to turn. So they have made strides to make things better, and they have given us various different automation methods. And I'm kind of hoping that, maybe the next evolution of this are these download links where we can just download Photoshop and then we can all use the same Photoshop installer and we can just push that out to our clients. Because they really have come a long, long way. And I think whilst it might not be 100 A plus the best package out there, considering where they came from, you got to give them props.
Awesome. Love that. Shout out Adobe. Thank you. Hopefully we can continue to talk about the great things that Adobe will continue to evolve their installers with. So that's great. Armin, in your opinion, any packages or package vendors in the Package Hall of Fame this year?
So I'd like to point out that Firefox and Google Chrome are now providing package installers for enterprise IT deployments, along with the standard DMG installers or DMG archives, the user-facing deployments. And even though InstallerMator can handle DMGs and install it, having the PKGs is much better for any kind of deployment, whether you do it through InstallerMator or directly through Jamf Pro, because all of these tools, especially the browsers, have helper tools and parts that are not within the app bundle, and they deploy much more cleanly with the package installer. And I just wish more vendors would consider that and provide good PKG installers. And with that, I mean, of course, PKG installers that don't do weird and funky stuff in the pre or post install scripts. And yeah, it's easy to make fun of them or to be annoyed with them in those ways. And of course, we have to do that and point it out to the vendor to so that they can improve the packages. That's important as well. Give them the feedback and say, this package is probably not ideal, and that has worked. I mean, Firefox and Google Chrome are providing these installer PKGs because of feedback from the community. So it's great that works. But I also think that some of blame here has to be put on Apple, because they don't provide any guidance or documentation on what the best practices for package installers that are not from the Mac App Store should be. They are very, very silent about that. And a lot of the best practices in this area really come from community feedback rather than from Apple themselves.
Yeah, well, more PKGs, more good PKGs, hopefully in all of our futures. And I know if you are creating a package installer for some piece of software, to Armin's point, a lot of those community best practices, there's a developer.jamf.com article on how to create the best macOS enterprise-ready package. So yeah, vendors, if you'd like to be in the Package Hall of Fame in the future, check it out and make your installers better. Awesome. Very cool. Well, we're going to transition now to our patch solution spotlight. So every participant on this panel not only knows a lot about patch management, but they represent a solution that you can integrate, deploy with Jamf to make patch and app lifecycle management an easier proposition for you and your users. So with that, I'm going to pass off to Isaac, who again is joining us for the first time. And then we'll go through the rest of the participants. We'll have 2 or 3 minutes to hear a little bit about their solution, and then we'll wrap up. So Isaac, I will pass off to you.
Thanks, Sam. So we have a solution that sits 100% in a customer's Jamf instance. There's no reliance on any third-party applications or software. We built it all into various workflows that are uploaded to Jamf through scripts, through using Jamf's patch titles, and policies and configuration profiles. We have provided a branded experience that allows you to put your logo on dialogues that are prompted to the user. We give the users deferrals so that they can maybe not do the update when they're in a critical meeting. This has allowed us to fill out self-service with installers and uninstallers for applications, and then also for buttons for updating. Included with this is the ability to do things like critical updates, for example. So when Chrome has a major vulnerability, instead of giving them 6 days to update, you can give them 2 hours to update. We take care to make sure that if we quit an application, we try and open it in best methods possible. So if they're on a website when we quit Chrome, again, we're going to open Chrome with that browser windows and those tabs open again. Some of the other features we've added in are, if we have to take them away from their application, we make sure that we give them feedback as to what we're doing. We're downloading an app. This is how long it's going to take. These are the steps we're on. And this is the installation process. So we're capturing progress bars for Apple's install application and then showing that to them, because patching Word can take minutes. That feels like a long time when you're being taken away from a Word document. Someone can get started by checking us out on the marketplace. Come in, link to our sites there, say hi. In the future, we're looking towards adding more applications and trying to get some of the workarounds for some of the more difficult ones like Adobe Reader that have a lot of interesting changes, and then also adding in PPC profiles and custom configuration profiles for all the apps so that you kind of have an app deploy ready solution from the start.
Hi, yeah. So talk about auto update for Jamf. So with our solution, we are using on-device intelligence through metadata of the titles that we've got available to see if an update is required, as well as using Jamf's inventory to drive which titles need an update. All that boils down to in the end, essentially, is what the admin has seen, almost what the user sees, is like a VPP-like experience. You set up a policy, you tell it to run once a week to install Chrome, and just set and forget. Which makes it very lightweight and makes it, especially to administer. And this isn't just me saying this from the person that developed it. I was also using this across our MSP customers when I was involved in that team a bit more. Now I'm more on the product side, but yeah, we've got a couple of hundred Jamf deployments that we use this product with day in, day out. Since last JNUC, I believe when I was here last time, I mentioned maybe patch definitions were coming in. So we've now but if I didn't, we've now got patch definitions added. So there's a patch source which links in and uses the same metadata to check if a version of software is installed on the devices. So it's that kind of trust but verify. It's not just, don't just take the policies running as the fact that things are being updated. You can actually use patch itself natively within Jamf to verify that the software has been updated as you expect. We've also recently gone through our ISO 27001 certifications. We've set up a community on our Zendesk portal, and we're doing customer advisory boards and to dig in more information from our customers to find out what's the next evolution on this and start to expand the product. We've also expanded the profiles that we offer. So we've got a mechanism by which we've got PPCs, screen recording, notifications, all those fun profiles available for people. So they can be requested through one of our applications and through our service desk. And we've got integrations within Jamf to help with licensing. So install the Adobe products, then you can install your shared device license post and put that into one policy. That should be quite simple. And again, just set and forget is the ideal with this. And it's also, we're talking about auto update here, but actually this includes uninstallers. And for prior to Apple Silicon, We've also got installers for the major OSs as well, and arrays installed for major OSs. If you want to get started, if you head over to datajar.co.uk, you will see on there's a couple of buttons there for chat with our experts, and you can then reach out to our team and potentially request a trial, etc., as you'd like.
All right, so for Electron Patch, it's basically kind of the way it works. Again, like I mentioned, is clients get the install media directly from the vendor. And based on that container type, we basically install accordingly, be it a DMG with an app inside or a package or a myriad of different options. So essentially, an organization identifies the applications that they want to patch. They create a file with those applications and various other settings, and they deploy that out to their fleet. And then Electron Patch installed on the Macs basically starts to take action. If an app is not running, there's a silent update process that happens. If the app is running, then the user is given a notification, and they have the option to either postpone or update the app right then and there. And this process runs every 4 hours by default, but can be customized. And kind of a unique thing with Electron Patch is that you can use it in both self-service scenarios as well, other than just patching, or in stepped workflows like dep notify or Octary when you're enrolling a device as well. It works in any Jamf Pro instance, either hosted or on-prem, as well as Jamf Now and Jamf School as well. Since last JNUC, we've added a few features, some of which are that customization of the interval in which patch runs. So, if you want it to run every 10 minutes and be very aggressive, you could do that if you'd like. There's an active intervals feature that basically, if somebody defers an update at any point in time, if they close the app, even between this interval period, the app will be automatically updated. And then a new deferral limit feature where you can specify the number of deferrals a user might have before an update occurs. And the deferral limit can change based on the application as well. If someone wants to get started, obviously, they can go to the Jamf Marketplace and look under Patch Management, or go to electrona.com/patch.
So I'm here to represent InstallerMator, which is a script that knows how to download, install, and update nearly 500 applications and tools. If you want details, I had a session on InstallerMator at last year's JNUC, which you can search and watch. It's different because the entire workflow runs on the client. The download, the installation, pretty much as if the client were doing it themselves. But of course, it's fully automated and should be transparent. And you don't have to push and upload every package into Jamf. Since last year, we've improved the logging of InstallerMator. Actually, this is something that we got from Isaac, who is working with a fork of InstallerMator. It's very different, very specialized, but there is a cross-pollination and transfer of stuff here, so thank you for that. We've added some ways in which you can influence the behavior of each installation. InstallerMator has also learned how to install apps that require install commands or install scripts that are pretty much non-standard. The most prominent of these is Adobe Cloud Desktop, which is, of course, a great starting point because from there, users can install all the other Adobe software. And most of all, we've been adding new apps and labels, especially with feedback and contributions from the community. As I said, we are close to 500. By the time this airs, we might be above. And I'm just blown away by the feedback and the contributions of everybody. You can find us on GitHub, search for InstallerMator, or look on the Jamf Marketplace, or visit in the InstallerMator channel in the MacAdmin Slack.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Love those details and love the updates from last year. And yeah, appreciate Isaac, you joining us for the first time. You can find out more about all of these tools on the Jamf Marketplace or directly at the vendor website, as mentioned. And I do want to thank everyone for listening. Again, love having this as a part 2 panel. Hopefully you will see us next year as well. But with that, thank you all so much. Appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your JNUC.